going back for me, I just try to like build those disciplines before I have to.
When adversity came, I could have fell apart, but I chose instead to follow my heart. When adversity comes, I will never run, I will adjust, adapt, and overcome. Vision. Hello, everybody. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome back to the Speak Your Vision podcast. I am your host, Tariq Williams, Vision of Hope. But you know what it is. Not only I am Vision of Hope, but we are Vision of Hope. And this is your one-stop shop for everything empowerment. And we got a special guest for us today. Special guest in the building, real estate agent, soon to be real estate mogul. We're going to talk mindset, dreams. You know, I'll let him introduce himself a bit more. Dekimbe Smith, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, man. It's funny how long it's been since we talked last, but like I said last week when we connected again, it feels like it was just yesterday, you know.
Right.
So we're doing this. Happy to reconnect again, and thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely. You know, man, Dekimbe, you know, we go way back, like car seats, you know, well, not exactly that far back, but, you know, we've been buddies for a while, and it's been dope to reconnect. And I've been seeing, you know, a lot of the cool things you're doing on social media with your real estate and everything like that. You know, maybe we'll throw up a few reels somewhere up here when we'll get some good real estate advice, a quick commercial, if you will, for the people.
Breaking news. Experts are saying we're in a housing recession. But what does that really mean? At a record pace back in June, according to information that recently came out from Black Knight. And this tracks pretty well with the other data that we've been talking about as far as buyers stepping out because of increase in the mortgage interest rates, but another 4% as people continue to adjust for things like inflation, interest rate hikes, and everything else that is hurting the budget right now, right? But specifically, we're seeing a lot of homes on the higher end. Weeds, or are we growing trees? So I was listening to a new episode of the Bigger Pockets podcast, and David Green had asked the question, are we growing weeds or are we growing trees? And it really made me sit back and assess what I have going on in my own life as far as building real estate business, building the podcast with Albert, and just trying to manage everything. And I think sometimes what I really started thinking about was that we expect success a little bit faster than we're seeing it. And if I'm going back to, you know, when I was doing personal training and bodybuilding, I understood that these things take time, you know, and I think that's the thing that I'm reminding myself of week over week. Thing that I'm reminding myself of week over week after week is that, okay, these things that you're starting do take time. So that's why I wanted to share this with you guys and say, like, okay, are we getting ahead of ourselves with our expectations and not really just being real and saying, you know what, this might take a little bit of.
But all right, let's jump into it. So like I said, I've noticed some of the cool things you've been doing with real estate and social media, and you and I had a conversation about, you know, mindset. And so that's some of the things I want to dive into today. But tell me, what made you get on this? Well, actually, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the big thing on the channel is we talk a lot about language. So can you give me 2 words that explain where you got to where you are today?
I was thinking about this and I was like, 2 words. Okay. One, I would have to say is definitely discipline. And the second would have to be, and I don't know, maybe these are kind of like interchangeable, but resilience, right? So discipline and resilience. So that is what I would have to go with. So
Okay, you know, you're not going to give us those words without giving us a story. So
okay. Yeah, I don't know if you want to dive into it yet.
Yeah, so discipline.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Why discipline?
Yeah, so for me, that goes all the way back to when we were leaving high school. You know what I mean? There was that like transitioning phase where, you know, we're leaving high school, everybody's on to that next thing. And for me, it really didn't pop onto my radar, you know what I mean, that I didn't know what I wanted to do long term. But there was always certain things where I was like, okay, I'm interested in this, so let me stick to this, right? I'm interested in that, let me stick to this. So like that discipline that I like brought over from, you know, like growing up playing sports and things like that is what I tried to carry on. Even though I was kind of like wandering, I was like, let me just try to stick to these things. So right out of high school, it was culinary school, right? So that right there requires a high level of discipline. And I was really focusing on that week in, week out, month over month until I got to the point where I couldn't afford to go back to it, right? So I had to transition to the next thing, which was working in sales. And at that point, I'm like, man, I don't have much sales experience, but there's certain, I talk about those skills, like there's certain skills that you can just bring over once again to this other field. And if you just stick to it and keep doing it, you'll eventually start picking up like what you need to know, right? To like get better at it. So like for
Mm,
me, that was always a thing that I kept in my mind was like, I just got to keep playing this like the new player on the team.
mm.
And if I keep developing myself month over month, year over year, I'll get better at it until I get to the position that seems good with this job. And then you get to the point where you start realizing like, wait, I really don't want to do this job long term, right? As much as I loved, going through, the motions of climbing and developing,
Yeah.
this isn't the end all be all spot, right? So that's where, if you know my history, I talked to you about it. Like I started, let's say, okay, out of culinary school, I was doing sales at FYE, an old electronics store
Hmm.
that's now out of business. Then I went over to LA Fitness, and then from there is when I got into banking at Wells Fargo and Bank of America. So
So would you say the discipline comes into just the consistency in terms of trying to be your best in all those different avenues?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
For me, like I didn't even consistency has been a new thing like that I've been thinking of lately, right? It
Hmm.
hasn't even because once again, like I realized like over once again, we're still young, right? I'm 28, I think yeah, we're same age, right?
Hmm.
And you start thinking back, we have time to reflect now. We're like, oh man, what have the past 10 years been like? And like you said, you realize, right? It's like even you laugh and say it's like, wow, like it really had like 10 years, like, it's like what have those been like and what's been like some of the common themes, right, that you've seen in your story? And for me, like you said, it has been consistency and discipline, sticking to, but it's funny because like people will say, like, I'll jump from different things. So it may not be as consistent. But I think for me, my consistent theme is that I want to just keep developing myself and keep finding that next thing that really pushes me.
Yeah.
And once I feel like I've maxed out like where I'm at, I
Yeah.
have to get to the point, right? Like I have to say, like, okay, like let me open my eyes again, let me see what opportunities are out there, and then go after that one and then start running that race again, and
Yeah.
just continue from there. So that consistency and what I say, like resilience on the other end.
Right. Right. And man, you brought up so many interesting points there because you brought up school and high school not knowing exactly what you wanted to do for the rest of your life. And shout out to people getting ready to go back to school right now. It's about that time of year. But you mentioned that resiliency and continuing to push because you went from culinary school um to now real estate, right? And I think it takes a certain amount of resilience, I would say, to figure out like being okay with trying new things. So tell us, why real estate?
For me, well, when I first started thinking about real estate and first started, like it was 100% because of the money, 100% because of money, right? I feel like some people try to beat. I
Right,
feel
right.
like some people will try to like beat around the bush and be like, "Oh
Yeah,
no,
hey,
there's some great
keep
like,
it real. This is the Speaker Vision podcast. Keep it real.
right, yeah, because I was thinking back to the first time I was sitting there at the bank at Wells Fargo, and I was a teller at that point. I was making $23,000 a year, barely, barely making enough to like pay my rent, pay the bills,
In
barely making,
Philadelphia.
yeah, barely enough to stay in Philly by myself. So I'm like, all right, so I got to start figuring out some stuff, right? This kid comes in and he is the same age as me at the time, 22 years old, right? And he deposits a check. And I'll never forget this. I've told this story so many times. Like he deposits a check that is the same amount as my annual salary. Tariq, do you know? Do you understand what it's like to have somebody come in, slide a check under the window, same age as you, same thing, everything, and you are going to have to work the next 52 weeks to be able to make that amount, to make that same amount that he just deposited, right? That took him. And I was like, what do you do? Right? He was like, oh, I flip houses, and I help people like wholesale. I was like,
Wow.
what does that mean? And then
Right.
from there, I kept asking questions. Every time I met somebody in real estate, it was just question after question after question. And then I realized too, like, well, I didn't up and leave from that point, right? I spent another 5, 6 years working in financial services. So, but at that time, I was like, I really know I want to transition in real estate. So I'm gonna learn everything that I can learn here. So whether that be, working on, my investment licenses and learning more about that world, getting my mortgage license and start doing lending while I was at Bank of America, all
Mhm.
those different things were was like, okay, I'm going to prepare myself to just learn and immerse myself into this world and still get
Mhm.
paid, right? Because I don't want
Yeah.
to like just jump in now, into the real estate agent world and have to start working 100% commission based. So I was like, let me learn everything here. Let me talk to every agent, every contractor, every developer that comes in, and just see what I can just pick from their brain, right? And then on the other side too, I mean, you're sitting there at the bank, so you're seeing how much money these people are really making. So when you're sitting down in front of somebody who is making good money and they're actually answering your questions, oh, it was like a perfect setup. So I just had, yeah.
I got to comment on that because one, that is a great story. But I the interesting part about this, I feel like a lot of times in life, a lot of us are afraid to ask questions. So you had that story that happened. He slides the check, and you're like, what do you do? You know what I mean? And then after that, you consistently started asking more questions and getting more information. Were you not like skeptical, shy, worried about asking questions, like, or worried about being like, I'm not answering your question, bro. I don't even know you. Like, tell me about that.
Oh no, it definitely does happen. I mean, even still to today, right? The amount of people who I'll reach out to on a monthly basis and be like, hey, like, I like what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we should, no response.
Mm,
And it's just crickets. And it was the same thing, back then. But I think it's like anything else, right? We talk about training, you work out, right? We work out all the time. And it's just when you look at that, you go in, you fail, you try again. You go in, you fail, you try again. And that's the part of I think where the discipline and consistency helps with that. You almost become numb to the amount of like no's and the amount of just like, like brush offs that people like give you. So you keep going. And if you don't keep going, then you also realize at a certain point, if I don't ask these questions, I'm going to be stuck here, right? So what's your alternative? Do you ask the question and potentially get shut down, or potentially get an answer,
mm,
or not ask the question and never know?
mm,
Because that
mm-hmm.
one really has like one definite answer, right? We know what's happening on this side. If I don't ask that question, I'll never. It's like me and the guys like joke about it. It's like, okay, you go to the bar, you see a girl there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. You might be able to start up a conversation. That might be the one for you.
Right,
How will
right,
you ever know if you don't go over there and say something to her?
right,
You
right.
can leave that bar and then for the rest of the night be like, man, I really should have went up there and said something. That's the same thing with everything else, right? It's like you might see the guy at work and you might want to get up to his level and be like, say, maybe I can, go ask him a question, or how can I go and ask him a question? So that's another part of it too, where I realize is that there's different strategies
Mm-hmm.
that you can start using, right? If you want to get closer to people or if you want to win them over so they are more likely to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I still continue to work on.
You know, man, that's such a great point because when I think of questions, I think about, like common quote, Michael Jordan talks about you'll miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Exactly.
And that's exactly the concept we're talking about right now. And so I think about, opportunity, right? Opportunity can truly be anything if you let it be. I think it comes down to that discipline and resilience that you were talking about. But almost I, the word discipline is such an interesting one that I'm going to continually come back to because it's almost like being disciplined to know that you're going to have some type of obstacle throughout your journey
Yeah.
and being resilient to go through it. So I like the connection between the words that you chose.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you're talking about those questions and those what if this happened, if this doesn't, you just put yourself out there. Have there ever been a time where you were like, man, that was a waste of time. I should have never put myself out there.
Oh, well, I mean, man, the amount of stories like that could be a whole different podcast, right? Like we could have a whole nother episode just about trial and error,
Okay.
just going through the motions.
Right.
But it's funny because we just finished up a book in our book club called Range, right? And what it talks about is really why being generalist can actually help you in certain times when you really feel like you should just stick to something and just stay in there, right? And not give it up. But because like one thing I realized over that was like, okay, let me try this. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else. Right. And that's always been the thing for me that I've just repeated. So it's like try it. If that doesn't work, then continue on from there. Right. So Not sure if that exactly like answers like what you're looking for there, but
No, for sure it does. I mean, kind of. I guess what I'm gathering from that is you said try it, and if it doesn't work out, at least I tried it. So I don't necessarily regret that. Would you agree?
yeah, yeah, 100%. Like there's no real regret. Like once again, right? Because it's just, and once again, you got to weigh out your how much you're risking too. If there's no
Yeah.
real risk in what you're doing, then
Mm.
why not try it? Because then you always come back and be like, oh man, I didn't do that because I was afraid of what,
Rejection.
right? And you have to fill in the blank. Because if
Yeah.
rejection really is the thing, then that's so just, I mean, surface level. Yeah, I mean, like it is harder for a lot of people to overcome, but I think
Yeah.
that's where you got to keep working on that muscle, right? And saying, okay, how do I get better at
Mm.
this part of me that fears rejection,
Yeah. 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 For
right? And what
sure.
is it
And
about that I actually fear?
right.
You
Right.
know,
Man, so you said continue working on that muscle. So I gotta get to this, right? Because you did once again art institute, culinary, bodybuilding, being a teller, now real estate. Is there a connection or between the mindset you needed for all those different things, or is there a different mindset you have now that you're in the real estate game?
I'm happy you drew the connection between them because that was something I was talking to my brother about the other day. Where for me, I just look at it as like I play video games all the time, right?
Okay.
And when I'm thinking about like you start the game with your character, you wouldn't start the game with your character at level one and say, "Man, I'm gonna play this entire game at level one."
Right, right.
Right? Think about how crazy that would be. You would sit there and be like, "Okay, oh, now I'm gonna play this level. I'm gonna advance. You know, I'm gonna pick up some other skills there, pick up some skills there, and then see what the next level has for me, and then
Yeah.
keep it moving." If the environment the next level doesn't change too much, then cool. You keep playing in that world, right? You keep playing in that zone. But if you got to switch over to a completely different world, a completely different map, then that's where it is, right?
Hmm.
And that's the way I look at those things. And like I said before, some of them I was able to do together, right? So when I was at the bank, I was doing personal training, right? So that it didn't really pull me in two different directions where I had to make a choice between, oh, which one do I want to do? Right. For me at that time, it was like I'm at the bank, I'm meeting a lot of people, I'm making great connections, I'm developing, my communication skills here, but I also still love working out. So I'm at the gym working out. People are seeing, me working out who are there at the gym and they're saying, hey, can I do this with you? You take those communication skills from the bank, those sales skills that you've now developed, you put that into, oh, wait, you want to work out with me? Let me find a way now to package this and make it into a sale.
Hmm.
So everything along that way, like I realized it was just kind of, like I said in the beginning, you go through the same thing with the same level of discipline and the same just open like awareness and you're like, okay, how do all these things kind of connect? And like I said, reflecting back on it now, I realize that they weren't so disconnected as they may have seemed, right? Like when you look at the titles of how it is, because for me, it all just comes back to communication, right? Like I was doing exactly what I enjoyed doing at the time and just finding ways to communicate with people about it and then making money from it,
Hmm.
right? Which always kept me going, which always kept me like not bored, not in this state of just like, man, what do I want to do? I was doing what I wanted to do at the time, and then once something else popped up, once I assessed, like how that next move was going to be, I was like, oh, that's it. Or if I could do it at the same time, I'm like, cool. Let me also do this at the same time because why not? I think we're kind of similar with being very creative. So if you can just keep, scratching that creative itch and be like, man, how do I keep doing, more things to just fill that up and to fill up that need? I think that's what kept me going with it too, and why I realized that it was just one continuous thread over those different positions.
All right, cool. So you talk about those different positions and that there's a connection between them all and the sales aspect and everything like that. When you are trying to get into your different real estate transactions, is there a specific thought process? Is there a specific mindset you feel like you have to get to be successful in that area?
Yeah, I started laughing because when you said mindset, I had this conversation with a mentor of mine probably like 6 months ago.
Okay.
Because once again, I'm only full time in real estate now for 9 months now,
Hmm.
and one thing that we were working on, right, is okay, our business plan. How can I continue to develop and grow? How can I bring in new clients? And one thing I was telling him, for me, I like to understand the process that I'm taking people through before I take them through the process.
Right.
So with him, I was saying, I was like, well, I got to understand this about the transaction and this. And, I'm very, well versed here, but what about this other thing? And he stopped me and he was like, well, how would you take somebody through a personal training consultation, right? Like an initial thing. And I would be like, I would start with them and just understand where their mind is, what they've tried, where are they mentally? Once again, I wouldn't go any further with that. So I'm going to split the answer up in two parts: one with the clients and one for agents, right?
Let's
So
get
for the
it.
client, 100%, it is the first hurdle you got to overcome is that mental block. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm ready to buy a home. Oh, I want to, start looking at rentals. I'm ready to do this." And then after that initial conversation, they're ghosting you for the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next 2 months, because they realize, like, man, wait, that might involve some work for me to do that I'm not ready to do 100%. Right. So you got to work on your ability to get them over that, right? To improve that mindset, to really motivate them, to get them to believing that they can do that. Because if you can get them to believe that, then the rest is going to be pretty easy to get through, right? Because now they trust you. It goes back to that no like trust factor. They know you, they like you, and they trust you because you're really helping them go from point A to point B. Going over to the agent side,
Mm-hmm.
think about everything I just said. They're dealing with clients, right? So if your mind, like, that's the thing I realized, like, if your mind isn't right to deal with all of that, to try to motivate and empower other people, just
Ooh,
like you would be doing in personal training, right? And
yeah.
that's why I say it's all connecting. Like, how many times I would have clients who'd be like, hey man, I'm gonna be there with you 6 a.m. I'm there waiting at 6 a.m. and they are just texting me at 6:20 saying, hey man, listen, I'm gonna have to cancel today's session.
Wow.
You
Wow.
know, you realize it, and then that starts eating at your mindset, right? Your mentality. And it's just like, how, like, can I really keep doing this?
Wow.
I really love this. It's so draining. I'm not getting, that fulfillment, that sense of fulfillment that I thought I was. What am I really looking for? You know,
Right.
asking yourself those different questions. What are you looking for? Why did you get into this? What's the long-term thing? Who are you
Yeah.
trying to help? How are you serving these people? I think all gets your mind in the right place. And for me, like, that's why I do a lot of, journaling now. That's one thing I started in like the past like 3 years is I journal heavy, right? Like on a daily basis, I'm sitting there just writing stuff down, whether it be what I'm grateful for, what priorities I have to tackle, who I need to reach out to, right? And check back in with, because for me, that helps my mindset and that helps me prepare to just keep going, right? And it charges my battery back up. And if I don't do it, then only Lord knows how I'll be able to help anybody else, so yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's that's powerful stuff right there, man. I feel like there's a lot of lessons there. Um it's interesting because when I think about the gym, it's one of my hobbies. One of my favorite things to do is go lift and work out and everything like that. Since way young when I was playing basketball back in high school, middle school, right? But it's one of the things I think about, and why one of the reasons why I love going to the gym and working out so much is that it's one of the few places you'll go where, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this. It's one of the few places you'll go where everyone who walks in those doors are trying to be different, trying to be better, right? Trying to leave different, trying to leave better and grow. Now, you brought up an interesting point when you said you're sitting there at the gym and waiting for the 6 o'clock client and they're not showing up. Well, they didn't want to grow that day.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Because that's where, and I forget where I heard this first, right? But that's where you realize the difference between motivation and discipline.
Okay.
It's,
Ooh,
it's
real quick, I gotta plug this in. I gotta plug this
yeah,
in. We're gonna put this somewhere up here. The difference between motivation and discipline, ending the debate. Put
bro.
that video up a few months ago. I gotta plug that in. I
Oh,
gotta plug
yeah,
that in. But curious to hear your thoughts.
because I think that was one. You just through self-reflection, you realize, okay, I don't need to always be motivated, right, to do these things that people might that there might be some things that you do, right, that people look at you and be like, man, like, how do you stick to that? Like, how do you continue to do this? Blah, 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 blah. And for you, you just realize, like, well, I don't have to be motivated to do this anymore. There's nobody telling me to get up, man, and do this, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's no manager calling you and saying, hey, Tariq, get on the job, get to the gym. You are doing that yourself. And I think that's where it switches, where you are now becoming that like self manager. you're becoming that voice inside your head that says, anytime you remember back in high school when Tui would always talk about Freddie Soft, right?
Okay, go ahead.
So,
Tell me.
right.
Tell us the
So,
story.
right. So Freddie Soft is that voice that pops up in your head and it starts chirping and then it's sitting there telling you, oh, your alarm's going off, hit snooze a couple times, right? Stay in bed. You don't even need to show up to practice on time. You don't even need to show up to practice at all, right? Forget about that. You'll just get there the next day. You're not getting any worse. And you listen to that voice, right? And you do that one time while the other guys are getting there and they're showing up and they're getting better, right? And you and Freddie Soft are still hanging out in bed. And then the next day, right, you show up and you try to be that all-star, but everybody's looking at you like, you're not really here doing this, right? Don't come in here on that motivational nonsense. Like, we're disciplined. You're just here trying to be motivating. And think about that. Like, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the person who always has to come in on the rah-rah, like big, energy, big sound just because you're trying to like motivate people to, or trying to convince people that you're really as disciplined, right? Because just like you said, when you're in the gym and you see those people who are there coming in and day out,
right?
You're not seeing that. You don't see them coming in hype, blah, blah, blah. They come in, they know what they need to do, they get to the work, and they're back out. Next day,
Come
they
on,
come in,
come
do
on,
what they need to do,
come
and
on,
they're out.
Pastor,
And they
come
do,
on.
right? It's the same exact thing, and that's where we like. You might need to do certain things, right, to motivate yourself or hype yourself up before you get into that space, right? But even that becomes a part of it becomes your part of your routine, right? Forget about discipline. It becomes so routine that you're not even, it's not motivation or anything. It's just, I know I'm gonna sit here, like, okay, I might start my days and say, I'm gonna watch some videos from ET, right? Eric Thomas, ET, the hip hop preacher. So
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
sit
yeah.
that, right? Put that on 6 a.m., listening to that, like when I'm sitting there making, my tea in the morning and I'm getting my mind right. So maybe that might be a form of motivation. For me right now, it's just routine. Next thing, right? Okay, now I'm going on my walk, I'm going on my run. So it is discipline. I don't need to sit there and really have you, hey, Tariq, give me a call right now and say, and get me out of this space.
Yeah.
I don't have to have an agent call me and say, hey, call me and hype me up so I can make these calls, so I can make this next video.
Yeah.
Because if you're always waiting on that motivation, then it's like a drug. Right? It really is like, what happens if you don't get the drug? You don't do it, right? You don't need to. Very few of us need to be motivated to take a shower and stuff like that, right? That has become a part of your discipline and routine because we understand.
So I'm not going to speak for all the viewers. I don't know them, but hopefully they don't need to be motivated to take a shower.
Exactly, right? But like certain things like that, you realize it's like, well, if I stick to this discipline, then it probably has benefits with it, right? I don't need somebody to motivate me to do this because I understand why I'm doing it. But like you said, some of the people do still need that motivation. If we're talking about guys, right? Like if we're saying guys might need to be in their first relationship or to start dating before they start stepping up in certain areas, right? So that's their motivation. And then it becomes a discipline over time, right? Going back for me, I just try to like build those disciplines before I have to. And that could be because of prior experiences and stuff like that. So
man, I don't I gotta emphasize something that you touched on a lot of excellent points, but I'm gonna sum it up like, because I don't even know you realize the quote that you just said. All right, and now I lost exactly how you said it, but it was just like, be disciplined before you have to.
oh yeah.
That's strong. That's strong right there, because one way or another, like, you're gonna have to be accountable and responsible for whatever it may be, but be that before you have to be.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, man.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I forget the exact quote, but I think Ayn Rand has something that said similar along that where it's like you can try to go through life avoiding the realities, right? But eventually you'll have to start dealing with those consequences of the reality that you avoided the whole time. And for me, that was also a part of, okay, why do you need, like in the beginning, right? You need those motivations. So that might have been looking around and looking at yourself and you're like, man, I'm not where I need to be. Why is that? What am I not learning? What am I not doing to get to the point where I think I should be, right? Nobody else is telling me I should be there, but like I see myself at another point. Why am I not doing those things? Is it going to wait for somebody else to come and kind of kick me in the butt and say, hey, Dekimbe, I see you in this position. Okay, great. What do I need to start learning to get in that position?
Yeah.
Or hey, Dekimbe, I think you should be making $500,000 a year, $1 million a year. Oh, really? You see that in me? Thanks. I'm going to go and start. I'm going to go and start building. I'm gonna go and start building the financial disciplines, and the behaviors, start learning about
Yeah.
investment finance, so I can get to that point that you see for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that's the point of just like, just self-confidence too, which I probably like. I mean, my parents are really good at kind of just reinforcing a lot of things. So that also helps that like side of me where it's just like if I see it, I want to learn what steps I need to take to get to that point, then just recreate that.
Yeah.
Going back to my mentor, Josh, he said the same. He's like, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, we're just trying to make it go faster.
Right. Ooh, love that.
Right. So that's the thing for me. I'm like, okay, what's the discipline to make the wheel go? And now how do we just speed that up a little bit more before I need to know how to do that? So
And so one thing I want to talk about as well, because I think it's important. So when I've been seeing your content, watching your reels and everything like that, and you're talking about real estate, I'm like, gosh, man, Dekimbe really knows what he's talking about. And then you mention that you've only been doing this for 9 months, but I
mhm.
think that it's the mindset that you're bringing to it, the value that you're bringing to it, where your clients can really trust you. And so, do you feel at any point that you're less than because you've only been doing it for such a short amount of time?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked that question because it still goes through my head every week. When you're sitting there making content or talking about something, and you ask yourself, man, is there going to be some agent who really has nothing better to do, who's going to sit there and say, oh, well, you haven't been in the business for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, so you don't know what you're talking about. And then I just always realize too, like I just kind of rebut myself with that and say, well, if that agent does come up and say that, or if somebody ever challenges you with what create content
Yeah.
from that and just be like, hey, well, what can you tell me about this?
Right. Right.
Right. So I'm starting a conversation. That's how I look at it every time. How can I just start a conversation around something that I'm interested in?
Hmm.
If I'm interested in it, then there's probably a couple other people out there who are also interested in this topic, especially if I know who my market is, the people I'm really trying to target. Then I'm just starting that conversation. And from there, I've seen great growth over the past 6 months. Well, yeah, 7 months I've been doing this now. And it is so interesting to see. And I haven't had that point yet, right? Where somebody really challenges you or says, like, oh, well, you haven't been in the business long enough to, speak on certain things, because that's also part of it too, right? You speak on the things you know. And a big part of what I want people to also realize is that I want you to know what I'm learning along the way. So if I'm learning something new, or if I'm at a new development or a new project in the city, I'm gonna sit there, right? Put on my video and say, like, oh, I'm checking out this new tour, I'm checking out this new house. What do you think about it? Oh, did you guys know X, Y, and Z, about this? Did you know about that? And not only am I learning, but the people who are potentially looking to buy real estate, looking to rent, looking to invest, maybe want to be agents in the future, are also learning, right? So it's more so just like telling a story about my journey, through
Hmm.
real estate, as opposed to really sitting there and trying to be the person who sits there and says, this is exactly what you need to do, right? And this is blah 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 blah. I
Yeah.
might have those, but I don't want to come off like some veteran right before I am. But I do understand that like I have a way of communicating that makes it still sound good.
Right.
So if I can
Yeah.
still make it sound good without trying to come off like, a big headed person or somebody who is been in this forever, then I think that's where my sweet spot is, right? And I think that's what I've always trying to do. Going back to personal training, there have been trainers out there who were in the same gym I've been, right, who have been training for 10, 15, 20 years,
Mm.
who aren't getting the same amount of clients I'm getting.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't think it
Yeah.
has anything to do with the real knowledge that you have at that point. It's how well are you able to communicate with the people. And for me, with social media, that's all it is. How well can I communicate with my people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and
You
that's
know,
my size.
yeah, you made me think about a few things about my past a little bit, and I'll share. So, I mean, Dekimbe, you were there a bit and everything like that in high school and everything like that. For the people who don't know, I lost vision. I became blind at the age of 16,
Mhm.
and it was a new experience for me, and my life changed. Not to get into all those details completely, but the reason why I bring this up is by the age of 19. I was teaching other blind people how to like start learning Braille and being confident in themselves and being independent, and that it existed and that it happened. I was working at summer camps every summer up at Penn State. I bring that up to say I was working with high school kids like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, right? That had been blind their entire lives. And they were looking up to me. And I remember like finishing shifts and I was just like, they've been doing this way longer than I have. You know, how am I that person for them? And it was, you know, and that question still kind of circulates in my mind sometimes, because they were born blind, right? And so that was just an interesting journey, interesting questions for me. I think you touched on it though. It's about communication, it's about empathy, connecting with others, meeting people where they're at. And I just think that's so important, and I think that has to be emphasized here in this mindset conversation.
Yeah, yeah, not to cut you off there, but I'm so happy you said that, like meeting people where they're at, right? Because that's what was popping up in my mind, as we're talking about this, was you don't sometimes know what it is that you're connecting somebody with, right? Or what it is that they see in you that you're showing them that they can get to, but that ability, right, to bridge the gap, right? Somebody see, and I've heard, I listen to a lot of these guys in just personal development, sales coaches and things like this, and it's always that common theme of somebody sees something in you, right, from where your story started, and they see where you're at even right now. And they're saying, yo, if I can get to where he's at right now, you know how different that will be for my life? If I can have the confidence Tariq has, if I can have the communication skills he has, if I can have the ability to go out there and just keep going day after day, the same way Tariq does. I don't know what he's sipping on, right? I don't know, like what Kool-Aid he's been drinking, but I need some of that, right? Because that's going to get the thing for me to keep it going. And that's what I heard from your story, right? These kids, 14, 15, 16, are looking up to you and saying, man, look at what he's doing. I want to
Right.
be just right. You found your people, and that's the thing. You found
Right.
them and say, hey, look, this is where I'm gonna try to get you to. And I
Right.
always try to tell people, if there could be more people who think like that, right, who think like you and say, how can I find more people like me who I can really try to help and serve in some way? Because I understand where they're at right now, but I want to show them, hey, this is where you can get to if you just do these. And I don't want to simplify anybody's, trials that they're going through, but if you do these things consistently, right? Not simple steps, but if you do these consistent steps, you'll get from that point to where you want to go, or to wherever it is that you see me at. If you can get people from the point that they're at right now, and just sitting there understanding that, talking to them and saying, okay, where are you right now? I've been there, I understand these things. Let me show you the steps that I took to get to where I'm at right now. I think you can do it too. And a lot of people will subscribe to that, because I don't think we understand how many people are really going through what we just went through 2 to 5 years ago. Right now,
Right.
how many people are just waiting for a normal person who can come on and just talk, to them and say, hey, let's do this, let's get you there.
And that's the thing, right? And when it comes to that when it comes to that personal discipline and growth, don't wait. Go get it. Go get it. You mentioned earlier a little bit about, what is Tariq sipping on, and being able to do what he's doing. And that made me think of something. And we have a couple more questions for you. What is he sipping on? Well, I guess this is the perfect time to bring up. So you're not only doing reels in real estate.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah. So the podcast, once again, just trying something new, realizing like, hey, we're interested in this. This is something that we can get into. So why not get into it? So about, well, I don't even remember exactly when, but at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Me and Albert were already talking about the idea of, hey, listen, we wanted to get in a podcast, and we love to talk, we love to communicate. Let's build out a platform that allows us to start connecting with a whole bunch of different people, start learning a lot more, and just start expanding, and seeing where this thing can really go. And plus, once again, we were seeing some of the other like podcasts out there, and we're like, oh, we can do that. You know what I mean?
Right,
And
right, right.
for me, like I really have like if anything, like I love the marketing and the creative side of this stuff, so I really dive into that. So I'm always coming up with ideas, different things we can do, So I'm like, Albert, this is the perfect thing for us to build and to build out, because there's so many other avenues that we can go with it. But Yeah, just starting with just first sip, right? So once again, we bring on other individuals, successful people in different fields, who have gone from point A to point B, and we bring them on so they can tell their stories, and we can share that with our community, right? And we look at that as a way for us to improve our wellness, improve our growth, and just continue to have great conversations. So yeah, and
That's
that way we can
awesome.
also stay pretty general with it too. So you don't get too, for us, we don't want to get too niche specific, right? Because we are very uh, we're very curious people.
Yeah, yeah,
So there
yeah.
might be one week we might see, like we had Stephanie Palmer on 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we had her on to talk about her and JD's trip that they took up in Canada on a 220-mile backpacking trip, right?
Wow.
A couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago now, we had on Natalie Brunell, who's a Bitcoin educator, right? And she goes on CNBC and does different different talks with them about like what's going on in the crypto market. So whatever we're really interested in, at the time,
Yeah.
or there might be certain themes throughout the year, and we'll be like, oh, let's start learning more about this. Let's start learning more about that.
Mm.
Because at this point, we're 76 weeks into it. So we know who our listeners are, right? We know that they're pretty much just like us and they enjoy hearing about these different types of things, right? But they all kind of stick with the common theme of, well, how is this really helping you? How are you finding some sort of joy, some sort of peace from this, right? Some sort of health benefit, some sort of wealth benefit. What is the benefit of what you're sipping on right now, right? And that's why always kind of plug in there,
I love it.
like yeah, what you're sipping on, yeah. So
Love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Any particular goals you're trying to accomplish with that at all, or
with the
just
podcast,
yeah, yep.
oh yeah, we say it all the time. 7 figure,
So is that
$1 million,
right?
million, like get the podcast, like build out the business to 7 figure. So and I realized, like, if you were to talk to me like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, right, and when I was still sitting at the bank, and if you were to tell me that I would be talking like this now, and even there are people who are going to hear this and be like, Kimbe, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, probably.
Exactly, right? Like, yeah, probably, okay, right? And that's the point that I get to, where I just realize it really is all a mindset thing, bro.
Yeah.
It is 100% a mindset thing.
Right.
The amount of multi-millionaires who we don't understand, who are walking around doing crazy simple things.
Yeah.
Right? With no sort of marketing plan behind it, with no sort of sales plan. They are just doing it and running. It is insane. And then the people who really get systematic with it and really grow and put strategies behind their ideas, then that's a whole different ballgame. And that's where my mind is right now, is that understanding it's like, we have a really good thing going right now.
Yeah.
It's been developing well over the past year and a half now. What happens, when you're 3 years into it, 5 years into it, now when you've connected with hundreds of people, now when you're doing networking events, when you're doing different travel summits, across the country, when you're now getting people, subscribe to, like, we have a book club that's growing, when you get different things, different parts, right, of the umbrella really going and starting to generate, obviously, like, income and stuff like that, what can it grow into? But that's why I'm also really big on the community aspect right now and just building that out. Dope. Because you can't do any of it, right, without people. If nobody's listening, then you're really not doing anything, right? You're just talking to the wall pretty much, right? And sitting there and be like, hey, you guys listening? So you have to be connected with the people to have like big dreams like that. Right. And I forget, who is it? I think Zig Ziglar said it, where he said, if you can find a way to help enough people, right, then you'll find a way to have exactly what you want in life, or something like that, right? Whereas like, if you want $1 million, just go help enough people, right, and get that.
Yeah, for sure. That speaks to exactly a bit more about my platform. So just real quickly, I want to touch on the story, and then we'll get ready to wrap up here in a second. When I lost my vision, I still joined the basketball team, and I still made the team, and the coach made a point to tell me, like, Tariq, you didn't make the team, Coach P, you didn't make the team because I feel bad for you, because I know you. You made the team because you're one of the better basketball players at this school, and you'll work your tail off. And that meant a lot to me, right? And so I was in a newspaper, and the title of the article was A Vision of Hope, okay? And so then that was like the cool thing for a little bit. And then when I was creating my platform for this, I recognize that it's not only about me, it's not only about Dekimbe, it's about all of us. And that's how I created the title for the channel, not only I am Vision of Hope, but we are Vision of Hope.
I love that. Love that.
And so, we've talked about a lot of different things today, mindset, bringing everything together. Now, I guess if I could, one, for all your real estate needs in the Philadelphia area, Lehigh Valley, wherever, Dekimbe, where do they find you?
Yep. So you guys can reach out to me. I'm pretty much on every social channel you can find at Dekimbe Smith. So first name Dekimbe, last name Smith. If you can't spell Smith, then we probably shouldn't be working together. I'm just gonna put it out there.
That's the criteria. You gotta be able to spell Smith.
Just first name, I'll give you a slide. Last name, come on now, right? So
right.
Yeah. Or you can always text me or give me a call at 484-714-7790. So pretty easy to reach. Yeah.
Awesome. And so once again, the amount of drive that you bring into probably all, like, I shouldn't say probably, the amount of drive that you brought into this conversation and effort and discipline. One, I thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And I know you do that for all your clients. So if I can ask you this, once again, bringing it back, language is a very important concept here. And we defined it as we went through our journey here in the podcast today. But if I could ask you, what are two words? We did the two words that will define how you got to where you are now. What are two words that will be on your path, be on your journey, to help you grow in the future?
Oh man, so I definitely had the first word. The second one was a little bit harder for me to think of because the first one is I had this thing that I started that I started doing, which was identifying a word of the year, right? So for me, my word, right? So
I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit there. Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
Your word?
Yeah, the word of the year is momentum, right? So my focus right now is continuing. We talked about this one, but continuing that on, right, and just building upon those processes, right? Building upon the course of events that have been picked up over the past 5-10 years and saying, okay, where does that get you over another 5 to 10 years? So maybe, and you'll love this because on the other end, right? On the other end, then I would think my word, and what I always come back to is vision, right? What does what does the vision really look like? And so it's funny because you say what does the future look like if you don't even have a vision of what it's supposed to?
Right.
So that's why for me, if you pair the momentum, you keep doing those things, but also have your thoughts going in a certain way, have your mind in a certain way, you'll get even if you don't reach the goal, you'll be 50% of the way there.
Right.
Because subconsciously you're already thinking, man, I'm gonna be a millionaire. I need to just do what millionaires do, which means I need to improve my skills. I need to start connecting with more people. I need to start just doing, different things to just improve myself as a individual.
Yeah.
And then I'll be there, right? I'll take the right steps to get there, but I got to think it first, right? I got to see myself even being in that position. Right. Or then what's the point of me continuing my momentum in that direction?
Right.
Right.
Man, you well, I gotta throw this up here on the screen in a second. Because you mentioned vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I recently put out merch, okay, and it's my logo and everything like that. But in the bottom, there's some dots, okay? And if you don't know, you don't know. But if you know, then you know, okay? And so what it's actually Braille, and it says the word vision in Braille. And that was important for me to put there because just because other people don't recognize your vision doesn't mean that it's any less great, right? Ooh. So as long as
come on, man.
So
that's some good stuff. That's deep.
So we're gonna throw that up there. We'll throw some pictures for everybody and stuff like that. But just you touched on that. I had to capitalize on that because that's powerful stuff, man.
I like that. It's just like you said. I think once again I've been listening to a lot of these guys, right? Sometimes you do need to like come out of your funk or just need some things to keep going, And I was listening to Steve Harvey interview that he did with the guys from Earn Your Leisure. I don't know if you watched the Earn Your Leisure guys, but they've been doing some great stuff over the past like 2-3 years as well. But Steve Harvey was basically saying, the vision was meant for you.
If God wanted somebody else to see it, or whoever it is that you believe in, if they wanted that other person that you're trying to explain it to see it, he would have put it in their head.
Yep.
You guys would have woke up at the same time, called each other and said, hey, we should do this. And be like, man, that was funny. I was just thinking about that too. Right. Which does happen sometimes with people, which is great. Right. And I think those are the people who you want to continue to rock out with, because as you're doing this and trying to reach that vision, man, is it important to have the right people around you. Right.
Vision.
Because without that, then that vision becomes real blurry after a while. And it's just like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I really see it the way, I saw it in the beginning. And that's where it is, right? You stick true to it, but also stick to people who can help you reinforce what you already have and bring to the table, right? So pair those two, and I think it'll be good.
Yeah. Vision. Man, Dekimbe, this has been fantastic, man. Final words for the people.
Oh man. Like I said, like over the past, ever since we've been out of high school, I realized like one thing I've always kept in the back of my mind was, man, what are people going to think about, me doing this or me doing that? Or do people think, I don't have an idea of what it is I'm going to do? Stop asking yourself those questions, right? Honestly, throw all those questions, throw Freddie Soft out the window and say, like, I really don't care about that voice that's really just trying to like hold you back or like keep you right where you are. There's probably a reason that you're thinking about doing what you want to do. There's probably something pushing you towards that. And as long as you really take a step back and say like, okay, can I do this in a way that doesn't derail, everything that I have going for me in life, because people are in different situations. Everybody's life is different. So really just assess it, right? And say, okay, how can I make this move? Because it does seem like something I want to do. But the real reason I'm only holding myself back is because of what somebody else is saying. And if that's what it keeps coming back to, then you got to jump off. You got to jump off the cliff, right? And just say, I'm going to figure it out, and that's been my mindset for the past 8 years now, and why I move into that entrepreneurial space where it's just like, and learn how to build a plane on the way down. And that's where I'm at with my life right now, right? It's just like, take the leap and you'll figure it out along the way.
Right, man. It's interesting. When I was talking, I did on the podcast a little bit ago with Reese Ford, model, actress. We were talking about the podcast and everything like that, and I said, let's get after this. Our goals and dreams are waiting.
Yeah.
So, man, Dekimbe, this has been fantastic. This has been awesome. It's been a pleasure having you today, man. I look forward to the power that people get from this conversation, because we touched on a lot of different things here. We're definitely gonna have to bring you back. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, man, thank you again for having me on. This was a great conversation. I feel like I got to go ahead and take a step back, and see like what I'm really doing, right? So I can make sure I'm showing up for people, and and showing up for myself, like after this, right? Like, and that's another reason why I love having these conversations with like-minded people, because you get it, you know what I mean? But this also recharges that battery and just lets me know, like, all right, there's a reason we're doing this, right? So let's keep going. So whoever's listening, just keep going.
That's it. And remember, not only I am Vision of Hope, but we are Vision of Hope. Have a good one, everybody.
When adversity came, I could have fell apart, but I chose instead to follow my heart. When adversity comes, I will never run. I will adjust, adapt, and overcome. Vision.